There we go. I'm a pretty informal presentational speaker. For someone who teaches public speaking, I like my audience members to ask questions. There's no way that you could get everything from the slides. So if you happen to miss something, or if you need clarification, or even if I'm rushing too much, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself and totally interrupt me. You're allowed to do that, or you can simply type it in the chat box as well. So tonight we're talking about creating the ideal CV and resume for library information science job seekers. And the LIS field is somewhat more complicated than the other iSchool related programs, because depending on the type of library institution or organization you're going into is really going to dictate what kind of resume or CV you're going to be using. So the first thing you really should know is that you want to empower your resume and your curriculum vitae, right? How do we do that with a one-dimensional document, right? We don't get to include little voice clips with our resume. We don't get to include real pictures or Instagram stories with our resume or CV. So we need to make sure that we're putting every piece of text we're putting on a resume or CV is empowering you as a potential candidate for the organization that you're looking to get into. Your resume essentially needs to tell a story. This is your story, your narrative about where you've been and what you're looking for in the next step of your journey. And so I really wish that my students would think of the resume or CV more as your own piece of application equipment that will be your ticket into an interview with the position that you're looking for. So your resume needs to tell a story, and essentially that story needs to be your value proposition. What are you worth? What is it that makes you worthwhile in terms of your professional background? Think of the best commercials, the best films, the best music videos. They're always trying to tell a story. It's the same thing with a resume and CV. I want you to really feel connected to it. I don't want you to think of your resume or your CV as a chore. I would actually say your cover letter is probably more of a chore. How do we empower our own background on resumes? We use power verbs to demonstrate our skills. And so we do this by the sort of the aesthetic of showing, not telling. That we're going to use words that have a heavy sort of lexicon weight to it. So that way the employers get a feel for what we've demonstrated in previous roles. So an example here, sometimes I see on resumes, managed, communicated, researched. My favorite still to this day is worked. That's always very telling of what your background is, right? You worked something. So, and some examples of power verbs, how do we make manage seem more empowered, right? We can say delegated, we can say supervised, innovated. How about communication, right? We can use terms like addressed, corresponded, delivered. How about researched, diagnosed, investigated, uncovered? Instead of these very basic terms that don't really say much, they're not very effective in the weight they're using to describe your skill set, try to use these more powerful words and terms to give color and credence to your background. I used to hand these out in our when we did face-to-face workshops, pre-coronavirus. And you really can just Google power verbs for your resume, and you can find tons of amazing resources out there that can give you some ideas and synonyms for other terms that you're looking to use. And another good tip is don't repeat power verbs on your resume. If you're you're listing skill sets under a particular career or experience, try your best to not be redundant in your use of those terms. It can actually be very distracting. The big secret here, and I don't think this is a surprise to all of you, use the job advertisements language in your application materials. There are a few reasons for that. The main reason is you're making your CV or resume more relevant, and that's key. But the other thing is that sometimes those key words are really what those search committees are looking for. And I'm not saying to load up your resume or CV with just a bunch of buzzwords to try to get your resume through the system. What I'm saying is try your best to make it as relevant as possible for the position that you are looking to get. So when trying to decide, do I want to use an academic CV, do I want to use a curriculum vitae, or do I want to use a professional resume? It all boils down to the kind of institution and organization you're looking for. So traditionally, those very standard professional resumes would include something like a public library, a K through 12 school-related library, a corporate library, specialized governmental libraries, and medical libraries. Now, just a little caveat about the specialized governmental libraries. Most of the time, if you are going to apply for a governmental position within a library, they will give you the template that they want you to use. And if you deviate from that template, you actually run the risk of eliminating your chances from that position. Now, if you will see that on the job ad, like it will say, please use one of our governmental resume templates. And then they will give you the link for that, and then you can use that. That's usually not a problem. By the way, those resumes are always, in my opinion, the hardest ones to look at because they're just not sexy and pretty. And so that kind of goes along with medical libraries too, depending on what kind of medical library that you're working in. Are you in a state or public medical library, such as SUNY Upstate Library? They may want you to follow a particular template as well. So just check that out. On the flip side, when are you using the curriculum vitae, right? That's more of an academic document. And so those are mostly valued at university libraries, community college libraries, museums, art centers. If you are applying for, let's say, another Master of Arts role, or perhaps a Master of Science role, or even a PhD admissions. For admissions, you almost always want to use an academic curriculum vitae. And then also for scholarship, fellowship applications as well. Lindsay has a comment. Lindsay says, I've done a government resume. The only good thing is you can write paragraphs about your experience. Lindsay, that's a really great point. I wish that we had the opportunity to do that on all of our resumes because it would make it a hell of a lot easier. And so that's a really good point that you're making. It's almost like they want you to do everything we tell you not to do with the traditional resumes. And so what I like about what Lindsay is bringing up here is it's so important to make sure that you check out that job advertisement or internship advertisement to make sure that they're not asking for a specific template. Because again, if you don't fall in line with that template, that could either totally screw up the way your resume is filtering through their applicant tracking systems, or they can just say, ugh, you don't know how to play by the rules, we're not taking you, that sort of thing. So thank you for that. So let's start with the professional resume. The whole purpose of the professional resume is like to get to the point. The mission is to get noticed quickly, to be succinct, and to be concise. And it's really one of the biggest challenges of this professional resume is that, well, okay, how am I supposed to really get across the breadth and depth of my previous experiences if I'm only confined to one single page? Especially if I've only had 1 to 5 years of experience. That resume's got to be one page. How do we do that? That's the challenge. And I highly encourage all the students in here today to make sure you sign up for a career counseling appointment to work with a career counselor one-on-one so you can get that kind of feedback for you. The standard rule is 1 page for every 10 years of experience. Typically, the professional resumes, corporations especially, they don't like to see more than 2 pages even. So I've been, quote, in the business for 17 years now. And so my resume is begrudgingly 2 pages. It also needs to be detailed and aligned directly to the specific position. And I know what you're thinking, Christopher, how am I supposed to be detailed and succinct? It's a really big play on words, and it's a really important to try to make sure that you're getting the maximum amount of information across without really going on and on and on and becoming too long-winded. And it's a great idea to use that job advertisement almost as a framework or a roadmap to how you're going to be designing your resume, and as we may touch upon later, your cover letter as well. The most important / relevant information should be emphasized. So there may be things in your background, your repertoire that you've done in previous experiences that are really great, but they don't have any relevance to the role. And so if you've got the room for that, that's okay, right? But if you don't have the room for that specific piece of experience, you're gonna wanna judiciously figure out whether or not that is the right role or piece of experience to have on your resume. You want to weigh out what it is that the hiring managers and the search committees are really going to be able to get about you as a candidate first, before you can start padding your resume with things maybe from 8 or 9 or 10 years ago that may not seem relevant to the particular library organization or the role that you're looking for. This is especially important for folks who are transitioning drastically from one industry into the library field. We tend to get a lot of students who are making that big change. That's not to say I want you to omit everything in your background. Obviously, that's important. You've worked hard to be there. But again, try to relate all of your skills as transferable as possible to what the position is asking for. Professional experience is so important. Internship work, real world work. And let me also emphasize here, professional work does not have to be paid work. It can be projects, it can be volunteer work, it can be maybe something you've done for a friend or a relative that they're asking for, or you volunteered at the local organization or the library. Guess what? That's still professional experience, so consider that. It's always good to have a more traditional aesthetic when it comes to the resume. I do have to say that in library information sciences, generically speaking, they want you to be a little bit more creative. They want you to have personality. They want you to stand out from the crowd, but also read the room. Know your audience. If you're applying to a public library where they just don't have the time to really deal with your color and your logos and stuff like that, then really maybe you want to keep it to a more traditional, basic resume. There are two different forms of professional resumes. The most common one and the easiest one, I think, to get across is the reverse chronological resume. That's when you essentially start with your education at the top and then start with your most recent professional experience and work your way back. There's also a functional resume. Functional resumes are a little bit harder to describe. Functional resumes are more for people like me, who I've worked in education for 17 years. And so I've been in so many different organizations and places that my resume makes more sense to divide it up by function. So for instance, administrative skills may be one function, and then I list a bunch of skills that I've performed with administrative skills. Then perhaps my next section would be teaching skills, and then I list all the instructional experiences that I've had in my career. I am going to go into a little bit more detail about the functional resume momentarily. Elena. I have to learn how to read better. Elena asked a really great question. What about the summary at the top of a resume? So I'm going to go over this momentarily, but to rip the Band-Aid off, Elena, I'm going to say that traditionally speaking, employers don't want to see a summary at the top of the page. They want your resume to be the summary. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but the summary usually takes up a big chunk of space, and it's typically not very specific and directive in nature, and it may lack some really important information. So, so you're not wrong if you have a summary on top of your resume or your CV, but at the same time, most employers don't typically like to see summaries or objective statements at the top of your resume. Sequence of headers for your professional resume. So these are all options for you and how you can actually go about the sequencing and telling that story of your background. You always want to start obviously with your name. Preferred name, I think, is always a little bit more authentic. Of course, they're going to need your formal name eventually anyway, or your legal name, I should say. But at the same time, having your preferred name on your resume is just making you look more personable. And that way they know what to call you when you're coming into the interview. Drew has a question. Are journal publications part of professional experience? What about books we've authored? I'm coming in from a purely academic background, but wanting to go back into public libraries. So Drew, that's a really great question. I definitely like to see publications on a resume if it is for a library institution. I will also say that your publication should probably be a separate section or a separate header, because let's be honest, getting published is a really big deal. It's hard, it's time consuming, it's got to go under a rigorous peer review process. where a lot of MA and MS students never even get published. So you definitely want to have publications on there, but I would actually list it separately from professional experience, even if you're looking to go into something like a public library, because it doesn't matter, regardless, that publication is going to make you look like a rock star, even if it's not relevant to the field. Just being published is a big deal. And Elena, glad. Yeah, so again, Elena, you're not wrong if you want to use a summary. It's just that 9 out of 10 times, employers don't traditionally see those, or they would rather you just get to the information more quickly on the one-page resume, if that makes more sense. Phone number, email, LinkedIn. Your mailing address, honestly, is not important anymore, folks, especially if we're working in a remote world. It doesn't necessarily matter if you have a New York City mailing address on your resume or your CV and you're applying to a public library, New York Public Library system. So the mailing address you don't need on anymore. It just really is adding more text onto your resume that's not as relevant. Education, certification, and GPA should always be towards the top. Of course, look, if you don't want to have your education towards the top, that's obviously your decision. You know, employers have voiced to us that you are in one of the strongest LIS programs across the country. So therefore, you really should position that at the top of your resume or your CV, so that way they know that right away. GPA is really only important for seeking the internship, and that's because the GPA matters. You know, they want to make sure that you're not going to fail out at the end of the semester, and that you're in good academic standing. You've achieved the confidence in the content that you're learning in your master's program. If you're applying for full-time roles, typically you don't need your GPA on there, but hell, if I had a 4.0, I'd be putting that all over my resume. By the way, I did not graduate with a 4.0 for my master's. 3, relevant coursework. Relevant coursework is especially important for those of you who are looking for internships. The reason why relevant coursework is more important for internships is because that is your foundation, right? Those courses are those foundational courses and sort of the academic ethos that's going to provide you a boost in the potential of getting that internship. To get an internship, they're not looking for tons of professional experience, because that internship is supposed to be giving you that professional experience. If it wasn't an internship, you know, and they were looking for professional experience, you'd be making a lot more money. If you don't have the room on your professional resume for relevant coursework, or if you've already had a great internship, then you don't need to have relevant coursework on there. You don't need tons of courses on there too. You could just have 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't need to overload it. Professional history is probably one of the most important elements on your resume, because that's trying to give you some sort of professional credibility when it comes to taking on the library field. Now, I don't want people to think in here, especially I think Drew just asked about academics. Because you've worked in academia, I don't want you to think of that as not being professional, right? I don't want to give that impression. That would be kind of rude. Certainly instruction, research, that can all be deemed professional. Think about going into a research librarian role after all. That's, you know, the academia piece to that is going to be really important. Relevant projects, of course, especially if you're working with faculty members. We've got some rockstar faculty members at the iSchool in our LIS program, and it would be silly to not include names like Dr. Oakleaf. She stands out as being one that people like to usually see on a resume. Drew says, my concern is that I spent so long getting my doctorate that it's going to look like I haven't spent a lot of time working though. Drew, I totally understand your concern. I want you to try to reframe your thinking on that and really try to think of working on your PhD as professional experience. You still had to teach, you still had to conduct research, you still had to communicate with students, faculty, and staff. And so I would encourage you to simply try to change your thinking of that. I also want you to think of academia as being a solid collaborator and partnership with traditional public libraries and community-based libraries as well. So, so I know this is, again, going to sound super corny, but the only one thinking that is you. And so if you reframe your thinking and recalibrate your vision there, I guarantee you that everyone else is going to see you in that way. Technology software skills, especially those information systems that you use in your internships or cataloging or anything like that is going to be super important as well. And then also professional organizations, if room permits. Obviously, being a member of ALA or NILA is really important. The library field is one of community, right? Like, unlike IM and unlike ADS and the undergrad program, library information science is really one that prides itself on professional memberships and being a part of that community. But if you don't have room on that one-page resume, then you can always leave that off. It's probably assumed you're a member of ALA or NILA if you attended a grad program in LIS. So what not to include on your resume? References, do not include those on your professional resume. The reason why, folks, is because you want your resume to have enough room for the work, the experience, the skills, the education. They'll get the references, right? If they'll ask you, they'll say upload it, or, you know, of course, when you upload your resume and then you have to retype everything into those stupid fields, guess what? That's going to be the place where you can include your references. Please know objective statements. Objectives, I like to joke around, went out in the 1980s, the late 80s, I would say. Objective statements just have become placeholders and sort of trite in the way that they are reflected on a resume. They really don't say much. Now, I will say an objective statement is probably pretty smart, however, if you do not include a cover letter. Or if the library organization does not want a cover letter, then an objective statement may be needed. And then finally, a summary statement, like I just said. Again, you're not wrong if you have these on your resumes, but it's better to include tangible skills and concrete actions, less conceptual stuff. Elena asks, what about professional academic conference presentations? So Elena, I'm actually going to say for your resume, that's totally up to you. Now, when I was in grad school, I did a lot of professional conference presentations, and I sat on panels and all that stuff. But my feedback that I got when I was applying to areas of higher education was they didn't want to see that on my professional resume. They wanted to see that on my academic CV. However, Elena, I think it would be a good idea to put those academic conference presentations on your resume if it's relevant to the role. So, you know, if an instructional librarian role is, you know, asking for maybe a resume and not a CV, then you're going to want to put those on there because that's showing teaching, instruction, information giving, and that sort of thing. Again, if you have the room, put it on there. So functional resume, like I said, is sort of avoiding the reverse chronological situation. Maybe you've worked in a variety of industries. Maybe you've been around for a while like me. If so, a functional resume may be more your style and may actually do a better job at trying to communicate what it is that you've done in your background. So instead of kind of starting from most recent and working our way back, we organize and categorize our skills. And here's some really great examples of functional resume headers that you can use. Program development and execution, especially in academic library roles, perhaps. Library and administrative skills, management, leadership, instructional leadership, planning, marketing, and assessment, data librarianship, that's really hot right now, collection development and access, and then, of course, preservation and archival work, if that's something that you've done too. Drew asks, so the ones at NILA, but not the ones at education research conferences, if it's not an education focused position. So Drew, I really am gonna encourage you to stick with what's most relevant. Now, I will also say, Drew, that coming up in another slide or two, we're gonna be talking about the academic CV. And academic CVs are gonna allow you to put whatever conferences you attended, whatever that you just attended, that you presented at, ones that you volunteered at. But unfortunately for the professional resume, since it's gotta be more succinct, clear and relevant, I would keep some of those maybe supplemental conferences off just for the sake of saving space. Yes, Elena, so you may wanna work with the CV then if you're applying to instructional librarianship positions. They may request differently, so just pay attention to what they're asking for. And if you don't know, just email me and I can find out for you. I'm your secret weapon. All right, the CV, the curriculum vitae, I just have to say that sometimes my students get cover letter and CV mixed up. So they'll see an application portal and it'll say resume/CV, and they think, oh, it's resume and cover letter. Well, where am I supposed to upload my cover letter if I don't have if I'm uploading my resume? So just please be aware, CV means curriculum vitae. I don't know why they do that, but so with curriculum vitas, you really are given a lot more flexibility. There's really very few rules when it comes to the CV. They're a lot more fun, engaging. You can have a lot more personality on a CV. Essentially, you get to really see the entire holistic picture of what that candidate's like, and that's why I love CVs. So the content emphasizes curriculum, but professional experience is also expected on your CV. So how you order it is really up to you and sort of the relevance to that position that you're applying for. Coursework and projects are also included as a focus. Your coursework, you can actually give a little bit of description of what that course was. You can put the course number, you can put the professor that taught it. Again, a great way to sort of name drop some fabulous faculty that you've worked with. Yeah, Drew, 12 pages, wow. That is amazing. I wish I had a 12-page CV. Yeah, you're going to want to cut it down. Now, the truth is with the CV, and you're going to see this on here, there really is no true page limit when it comes to a CV. Now, I know that Dr. Oakleaf suggests that you really should keep it to 2, certainly no more than 3 pages. And I think that that's good to heed her advice, but at the same time, Drew, you were going for a PhD. I mean, I think that you've earned the right to have maybe more than 3 or 4 or 5 pages. So keep that in mind. You're welcome, Elena. Collaboration with faculty and staff should be highlighted. Again, showing that you are collaborative and that you have good team spirit. No offense to faculty and staff, but faculty and staff are sometimes hard to work with. I know because I'm both faculty and staff and I'm a pain in the butt. But that shows a lot on your CV, and that's usually celebrated in academic spaces. Professional and academic organizations are valued. Again, there's really no true page limit. Always remember to include page numbers on each page. So that way, if they have to print out your materials for the interview, they're keeping them together, and that's their fault, right? That's not your fault. But flexible formatting. So you're going to probably be rearranging your CV depending on the type of role you're applying for. Again, if it's more instructional, you may want to put the teaching or instructional aid experience a little bit farther up. And if you are applying to maybe, let's say, a more data-centric academic librarianship role, you're going to want to maybe focus on the data library stuff first as well. A logo is totally okay. You can have more fun with the CV. Color is typically okay. If you want to play around with your initials, or if you want to maybe use Adobe InDesign or Illustrator to make your CV stand out a little bit more, it's totally cool. I understand that universities and academic libraries may get the stereotype of being stuffy, but let me be honest, that's not how academic libraries really are. And I bet the folks who've worked in academic libraries can probably attest to that. So you can have a little bit more fun with that. Obviously, you don't want to go too far into a weird town or bizarre town with your CV. Succinctness is still expected, but again, this is not as strict as a professional resume. So still try your best to be as brief as possible, but it's okay to go on multiple lines here, because the academic CV, if they're asking for that, that means that they're willing to take the time to sift through some applications and materials. So here are some headers for your curriculum vitae, just like we went over with the professional resume. And these aren't really in any specific order necessarily. So education, certification, GPA, if you did an undergraduate thesis or an undergraduate honors paper or program or project, a capstone, guess what? You can put that on your CV. Of course, if you did a master's thesis or a major master's project or a defense of anything like that, You can also host that under the education section as well. And Drew, I feel like you could have fun with that part. Relevant courses, you can, again, brief descriptions, optional with professor names. Relevant projects, thesis or assistantships. Those assistantships look great. Again, it's almost like you're showing a leadership position just by having that, that faculty assistantship or teaching assistantship. Obviously, any programming that you've done, any workshops, webinars that you've done, professional organizations, including on-campus activities. If you're a member of LISA, make sure you actually write out what LISA is, right? Or if you're a member of an organization that's got some acronyms, make sure that you're spelling that out and maybe giving a little bit of detail about what that organization is. Volunteer work looks really good, especially when you're in grad school. I don't know how you have time for that, but better you than me, I guess. Conference presentations, also including ones that you attended. I know sometimes as a grad student, I didn't really feel like I was worthwhile if I was just attending the conference while all my colleagues were fancy and presenting and I was just attending. Well, guess what? You attending a conference, that's professional development, folks. So make sure you put that on your CV. Poster presentations. Hey, poster presentations are great because they're showing how you know how to illustrate things into concept maps or diagrams or really fabulous pictures and images and that sort of thing, infographics. So you can include those on there as well. And then clearly, like we were talking about with Drew especially, I forgot how many 8 publications. Yeah, wow. I'm a little jealous, I'm not gonna lie. Publications should definitely go on your CV, even under review. I actually challenge you all to Google Dr. Megan Oakleaf's CV. I found it somewhere on Google one day and I was just blown away by her background. I was like, oh, she's published a lot. Her CV's, I don't even know how long, it's long. And wait, there's more. Professional experience is gonna be important. Doesn't necessarily need to be at the top, of course, depending on the role that you're getting. Digital competencies as well. This can be social media. This can be Tableau or Python. This could also be Microsoft Office. Guess what? Microsoft Office is still used in almost every organization around the country. So it's a good idea to just put that on there, especially if you're good at Excel. Guest lectures, guest presentations. Maybe you did a conference presentation and then a faculty member said, hey, would you mind dropping into my class tomorrow night to give the same talk that you gave at that conference? Guess what? You can put that on your CV as an additional presentation. Grants and scholarships, awards and honors, and references, which we again, we don't usually include references on the professional resume. We do like to include them on the CV because it's a nice way to conclude your story on the CV, almost like, oh, by the way, look at these 3 amazing people that have managed me or graded and evaluated me, and then you can contact them for some further great information. So I'm checking the chat. Oh, Drew found Megan Oakleaf's CV. That's great. Yeah, Elena wants to know what's your secret to getting published. I'd like to know too, because I've only submitted a publication once and it was, twice. And they were both, rejected. Lucky me. Items to remember for your curriculum vitae. So consistency is very important. And I feel kind of bad saying this because it's the same thing with the professional resume. Consistency is showing that you are paying attention, you're detail oriented, and that there's a nice rhythm to the pattern of your text on your document. Remember formatting. So try, I always laugh when our Newhouse students mess this up because as a student in the journalism school, I kind of laugh when they don't italicize or underline or quote things that are supposed to be APA. So when you are doing your academic CV, please keep in mind APA or MLA. Librarians notice that, right? And I'm not saying anything bad about librarians. I'm just saying like they notice that, whereas maybe a traditional academic may not. So make sure you're following standard APA and MLA guidelines. Name dropping is expected, whether it's an advisor, a professor, a reference, a reviewer, anything, your thesis committee or a jury committee or anything like that. Headers should be placed in order of institutional or position related importance. So try your best to find some nice way to divide up your your experiences. And again, reverse chronological still works on the academic CV. And then also any links to digital portfolio items or your LinkedIn should be placed at the top along with your contact information. The nice thing about digital applications these days is that your search committee could simply click on the hyperlink on your CV or your resume, and it will take them right to your LinkedIn. It will take them right to a publication or an abstract or anything else that you've worked on. Please consider adding those on your resume and CV, because I think that that's a great way for you to stand out from the crowd. And it is true that they may not always look at that, but I think it just makes you look more well-rounded. I think we have some chats. Oh, Drew's giving his advice. I'll get back to that in a little bit. Thanks, Drew, by the way, you're the man. So summary, so the CV versus professional resume. This is probably a good time to take a screenshot of this, or to just take a picture with your camera if you can, or smartphone. So what, the CV is the full professional and educational history, right? CV is basically everything. There's really no time limit. Of course, you do unfortunately have to worry about ageism in this day and age, but you know, showing the breadth and depth of your history, your work history is much easier on a CV. Your resume, it's just a summary of experience and skills. You're trying to fit as much as you can really on one page that's as relevant and pertinent to the position you're looking for. Length, there's technically no limit to the curriculum vitae, but try not to pad. I felt like I was doing that in grad school when I was looking at all my other peers' CVs. I was like, ooh, theirs is 4 pages and mine's only 2.5 pages. Don't worry about others, right? Just worry about yourself. The resume should be 1 page, no more than 3, depending on 10+ years of experience. Of course, if you've been around for 20 years, well, feel free to add another page to that, right? Uses, the CV is more for academic research, some government, applying for grants or fellowships. And resumes, basically every other type of library institution. Publications and conferences, so yes on the CV to all of them, resume minimum or select group depending on how much room you have on there. And then finally, CV modified to fit the job. CV, not really, right? Your CV, it's kind of easy peasy in a way, because you can use that to apply really to any type of position, LIS related position that's asking for a CV. And then resume, yes, unfortunately, it's got to be extremely modified to fit the internship or the job that you're looking for. So some of you may just have that professional resume right now and you're wondering, well, thanks, Perrello, how am I supposed to take my 1-page resume and make that into a multifaceted, multi-dimensional, multi-page CV? Well, take your professional resume and expand. I know it's easier said than done. But think about the courses you've taken and the objectives of those courses. Go back and look at the syllabi. That's going to give you some good details and some good information to put on that CV. Think about special projects you've worked on campus, off-campus experiences, conferences, posters, presentations, guest lectures, awards, honors, grants, scholarships, you name it. Think all the way back to your freshman year of college. Right? And use the CV almost as a way to show how you've grown since then, if you're looking to expand, of course. I promised that I would go over how to get noticed. I know we're running short on time, but I really want to make sure that for the students who hopped on this call tonight, that I'm going beyond the resume and CV. So the first thing I want you to know is that relevance is the key. Having relevant text on your resume and in the cover letter is going to be super important to you getting noticed. Again, not only because it may be going through an applicant tracking system or a database to kind of pull key terms off your resume and CV, but because once the search committee is looking at your resume, one thing might catch their eye, but then the rest of it may not seem very relevant, and that's going to be a problem. Leadership roles in graduate schools, I was kind of making fun of myself because I really lacked those leadership roles in grad school. Why? I was busy, right? I was a TA, I was doing research, I was going to conferences, taking classes, working. And so leadership roles are hard to come by in grad school just from a time-saving perspective. But let me tell you, if you can carve out a leadership role on your resume and your CV, you're going to get called in for an interview. Who you know, and I know that sucks to have to say that, but who you know does matter, especially in the library information science world. We love that the LIS field is one of community and that everyone seems to know everyone's name and everyone seems to have a similar superhero, a library superhero. Work and leverage those connections. If you don't have any of those connections, you can always reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect you with any of our Rockstar alumni in the program. I guarantee your faculty are going to be able to help you out with that too. And of course, using LinkedIn, social media. And I know that LIS students traditionally don't care for LinkedIn. I get it. It's just a lot of sensitive information on your profile. It feels very forced, phony with your photo and everything like that. But social media, it's not just LinkedIn too. You can find jobs and network in the library sciences field on Twitter, on Instagram, by using hashtags and those sort of things. So don't feel like you're just beholden to LinkedIn, although I will say that LinkedIn is a great tool. Lindsay says, I felt like extracurricular activities in grad school or leadership positions are hard, but especially if it's an online program and you're not even in the same state as the school. Lindsay, that's a really great point. My partner got his master's from an in a totally online program, and he kind of felt the same way. That's tough to do. I feel bad saying this, but I would almost recommend you reach out to the student services office and say, hey, you know, what's good for us online students, right? We want to feel connected.
It's kind of late for me because I pretty much just graduated. So.
Oh, Lindsay, okay. Wait, were you on the call last night?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I noticed your name. I'm like, why does that name look so familiar?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm still getting all these emails because I feel like I'm getting more of these than I did when I was actually taking classes now that I've just finished, and I'm actually right in that zone for job hunting. So
awesome. Lindsay, please feel free to reach out to me if you need anything, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that goes for anyone on the call. I'm sorry, I'm making Lindsay feel really good about herself, but really all of you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. If I don't know the answer to someone, or if I don't know the answers, if I don't know the answer to something, I can always figure it out. I can always get that for you. Elena says, is academic Twitter important? Because I hate Twitter. I'd rather have LinkedIn, LOL. Elena, I'm there with you too. I'm not a Twitter person. I don't know what happened, but it was like right around 2016, I decided maybe Twitter's not for me. And LinkedIn is really great because it's the professional networking tool. The one caveat with LinkedIn is, again, like I said, LIS organizations and professionals are finally starting to really commit to LinkedIn. And I get it, you know, it's sort of a learning curve. It's kind of a bizarre social media platform where a lot of information is just hosted out there. So I agree with you. I think academic Twitter is good if you're looking for research opportunities, perhaps grant funding opportunities, or even networking opportunities, of course, and especially if you're trying to follow maybe your favorite research folks from the LIS field, or like I said, your librarian superhero. Drew says, yeah, the only social media I'm on right now is academia.org. How do you don't have time, Drew, to be on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter? I would say you're missing out only from Instagram. I'm biased. I love Instagram. Instagram is my favorite. And Elena agrees LinkedIn is good. She uses it often. Special projects, of course, again, if you're lacking, you know, sort of that professional connection with your academics and then to your internship or looking for an internship, just ask your faculty, right? Go to any faculty members you've had in the past, shoot them an email, try to get 10-minute video call with them and ask if they have any special projects or research opportunities. A lot of faculty members are given huge pools of money that they can only spend on research and special projects. They need to spend that money because if they don't, it doesn't get renewed. And they usually have to pay it back. And so often they will hire grad students, even if it's just basic administrative stuff, answering emails or compiling you know, publication review pages or something like that. So for special projects, I highly recommend you reach out to faculty for that. Your cover letter is going to be really important. And I'll say it's especially important for the LIS field because they want to make sure that you have command of the written language, right? Drew, I don't think you're going to have a problem with the cover letter. But what I will also say is that in the LIS, sort of generically speaking in LIS field, they prefer a very nice, substantive, long cover letter. In every other field, they do not want more than 1-page cover letter. And then also networking. And again, I stress this with my LIS students because library science, again, is so community focused and community based that networking is really a key. And I have to say that I feel sorry for the students that weren't able to really go and get that traditional in-person conference experience, because those were always fabulous ways to network with future professionals. So we have come to the end of our seminar tonight, and I want to thank you all for being here and asking great questions so far. But I'd like to open it up for a few more minutes since you all dedicated yourselves to the 45 minutes, and I'd like to just throw it out there. If you have any other questions or concerns, feel free to unmute or type it in and voice them or type it in the chat.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I guess, so I know you want, for like professional resumes, you really want to specify for the specific job. Do you kind of have like a base resume you work from and just tweak it? Or do you recommend having more like a grab bag of like all your stuff and just kind of pull what you need for a resume and almost do it from scratch each time?
Yeah, no, you're gonna pull your hair out if you have to start it from scratch every time. I know I sound like that's what I want you to do, but I understand, you know, I wouldn't even do that, right? So what I would do, and this is what I tell students to do, is to have that foundational resume, even if it's 3 or 4 pages. And then what you can do is you can cut, copy, paste, move things around, kind of mold, shape things. What I will say too is if maybe you're looking to go into 2 different areas of library information science, right? Then maybe you have those 2 different templates and you just use them interchangeably depending on which position you're looking for. And if you find that unicorn position that just happens to be a nice conglomerate of the 2, then you can just kind of combine them and move stuff around. But if I had to apply for a job tomorrow, which I'm not, but if I had to apply for a job tomorrow, I would just go back to my foundational basic resume that I use and then kind of change it, add it, and then save it as save it as a new document.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Oh, Elena, I'm sorry. I think you asked a question in the chat box. Is it okay to just email contact professionals in this field and ask if they would like a teaching assistant? And of course it's okay to do that. That is cold calling. In the sales world, in the that's how people make money in the sales world. So yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with putting yourself out there. I think I certainly trust my LIS students that you're not going to be disrespectful, you're not going to be overly aggressive. And so I think as long as you're respectful, friendly, polite, you never know what can come out of that. I think it's the same thing with thank you notes, right? Like if you didn't get an internship and you wrote a nice thank you card or a thank you email, if no one else did that, they may just offer you another internship or another position with that company or that library. That happens a lot. So yeah, don't ever hesitate reaching out to people and just asking if they need help. You'd be surprised. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, that's how I got my internship. I actually was reaching out for one of the projects for one of the classes to see if I could work with them with it. Ended up running into somebody else on base who works for the hiring at a bar, and she mentioned that they have an intern over there who is quitting. So talking with both of them, I ended up stumbling into the internship position there.
See, that's amazing. Lindsay, was that you? I didn't see her. Okay, see, Lindsay just proved my point there. So thank you, Lindsay has my back. I appreciate that. And you can do that on LinkedIn too. I think LinkedIn is probably a little less formal, probably a little less scary, but they're probably not as likely to look at that message or get back to you right away.
So I have a question about Drew here. I have a question about timetables. So I guess I should kind of explain a little background. I basically just recently finished up my doctoral program, and it took me basically 9 years to finish from start to finish my doctorate, and that was way too long. So right now, what I've been doing is I'm actually trying to finish this program in 1 year. So I'm taking 3 classes kind of every quarter and then trying to finish it up. And I just finished my first quarter, but I'm wondering when should, if I have like 3/4 of a year left, when should I be starting to reach out for internships, and when should I start to be reaching out for job opportunities? Because I'm getting all these emails, we get all these emails in this program of openings, but I'm not sure if I should be looking, investigating those or applying to those if I haven't even done my internship yet. Like, what's the timetable there?
So traditionally, an internship is going to come halfway in your program, right? So if you have, you really can't commit yourself to an internship if you haven't achieved some of that content, right, in the LIS program, which is why if you just started the LIS program, I would not recommend you begin applying to internships for probably, until the end of your next quarter, if not maybe the quarter after that. And I have to, please forgive me, because I'm more used to the very long drawn out 15 weeks.
Sure.
But I would say, where are you? I'm sorry, I didn't catch.
So I'm in upstate New York right now, and so kind of halfway between, about a couple hours out of New York City in Orange County.
Oh, where in Orange County? That's where I grew up.
In Middletown.
Oh, I lived in Walden.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Middletown that's where we went to the mall sorry, everyone. This is turning into the Drew and Christopher show.
Yeah, but so I'm kind of I did all I'm at the stage because I'm taking 3 classes a quarter. I did all 3 of my classes I had to do interviews for, and I all did them with the local library. So, and of course I already knew a lot of people at local libraries. So I'm pretty, I'm well connected with like the library in the town, but I don't know if that's like appropriate to ask for an internship there because I already know them, or if because I don't know if that's see, that's the thing, is like we're supposed to build connections, but then I'm not sure if we're like, is it exploiting the connections? If is that nepotism? Like how does the whole thing is just very new to me.
That's a really great question, Drew. Wow. So yeah, no, I totally want you to use those connections. That's how networking works. Now, of course, if you are overly aggressive or, you seem like a perfectly nice person, so I don't think you'd be disrespectful, but that's the only time I would be concerned about reaching out to a connection for an internship. There's nothing wrong with asking local folks that you know in those libraries if they need an intern, if they need an assistant, or if they even need a part-time person. In fact, based on what you told me, Drew, it sounds like you're ready for sort of the next professional gig. Did you say you already had an internship with?
No, not yet.
Okay.
What I've done is I've done a lot of volunteer work with the prison libraries in New York State, and I've done some pay, like where they pay you to come in and talk to the librarians, because I'm coming from pedagogy, so I went to some of the workshops and was paid to give like some pedagogy talks on various topics. So I have like some work in the field, but other than that, like nothing that like I would be considered like a job. So I don't know like how I like transit, like obviously I wouldn't want to do an internship yet because like I'm only in my second quarter or whatever, but like it's weird to me like to try to figure out what the next steps are and how I'm supposed to like, because now like when I was applying for like academia and applying for like assistant professor or like adjunct professor positions or whatever, they would always like be like, list your most recent relevant work experiences. Like, well, I've been a part-time substitute teacher, but that's not really like what I've been doing from day to day. So it's like it's weird to try to conceptualize like what work experience means when you're coming from academia, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a really great point. So I would actually argue that you should start looking for internships, I would say this summer, if not definitely early fall. I say that because they still need, library institutions still need interns during academic semesters and quarters, right? It's not just during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you start finessing those connections now and ask those folks that you are connected with the same questions that you just asked me, because you might actually get a much better and clear answer from them. I personally think that your academic background, your 9 years in a PhD program, is positioning yourself very well for a career in any library. But I would say that the academic library space is probably going to be much more open and sort of flexible, and may understand the nuances that it takes to do a PhD program. And to me, 9 years seems like a pretty good span for a PhD. I mean, considering that I don't have a PhD, but I think that, you know, right now I would take that academic CV that you have and kind of work from there, narrowing it down as much as you can to really what you think bolsters the most type of skills that are needed for the internship or the positions that you're looking for. I don't want you to think that because you have a 16-page or a 9-page CV that is going to cut you out of the running. I think what's really going to be important for you is, more important for you is, why library information science? Like, what's the so what? What's your thesis behind why you've transitioned from a PhD into LIS? And I think if you just compartmentalize that and articulate that in a cover letter or in a pitch to a connection or a network, professional network that you have, that's gonna give you a lot more insight into where people think you should be headed for your next big gig. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. You're so welcome, Drew. I just want to extend this invitation. Look, I know that online students traditionally have their own special career services unit, but I'm on here tonight to let you know that you're still iSchool family, and I'm iSchool. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I may not be able to fit you in my traditional schedule for a career counseling appointment, but I'd be happy to speak with you or try to answer any questions via email or on LinkedIn. So this is an open invitation for you. I also kindly ask that you connect with me on LinkedIn. I think it'd be great, so that way we can kind of see each other on LinkedIn, we can share stories, and you can hit me up when you have an interview, and I can help you with all that as well. I just would like to say again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your Thursday night. I know it's here in Syracuse, it's not a beautiful sunny spring day. It was actually snowing today. So I'm happy to say that I'm not missing out on anything fun tonight. I hope you all stay healthy, stay well, and please, like I said, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need anything. I'm gonna have this recording hosted on our answers page, and if you'd like a copy of that, just shoot me an email. I'll send it out on the listserv as well tomorrow morning. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.